In the heart of nature, where beauty and danger intertwine, encounters with wildlife can turn from awe to terror in an instant. From the dense forests of Kodiak Island to the suburban edges of California, these chilling tales reveal the raw power of bears and the unpredictable consequences of human curiosity. Each story serves as a stark reminder of the delicate balance between admiration for the wild and the respect it demands. As we delve into these harrowing experiences, we uncover the lessons learned from those who ventured too close to nature's formidable inhabitants. Sarah and Jake were no strangers to the wilds of British Columbia. As experienced park wardens, they had spent countless hours patrolling the dense forests, winding rivers, and challenging terrain that made up the heart of the park. Sarah, a seasoned warden in her early 30s, was sharp-eyed and methodical. She had grown up in the outdoors with an understanding of the land and its creatures that came from years of personal and professional experience. Jake, her partner, was in his mid-20s. He was eager but still learning the finer nuances of wildlife behavior. Still, Jake had a natural curiosity that often made him want to press further, even when caution dictated otherwise. On this particular day in March 2025, they had ventured into a remote section of the park near a riverbank, their boots sinking softly into the damp earth as they trudged through the dense underbrush. The early morning mist still clung to the trees, casting an eerie quiet across the land. They had been alerted to signs of disturbance: broken branches, trampled undergrowth, and deep gouges in the earth, all pointing to a possible bear in the area, but nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to find. They followed the trail carefully, the strange scent growing stronger. It was different from the damp foliage, an animal's scent, pungent and unmistakable. The tracks were abnormally large, and Jake couldn't help but feel a growing tension in his chest. He had seen a few black bears before, but this was something else. The prints were massive, the claws at the edges unmistakable. They belonged to a grizzly. Sarah's eyes scanned the ground. She turned toward Jake and told him the prints looked fresh. Jake nodded, his pace quickening as he felt a thrill of excitement. It wasn't every day you got to track a creature as magnificent as a grizzly. They rounded a bend in the trail, and there it was. The river stretched out before them, glittering in the weak morning light, and a massive grizzly bear stood by its edge, its thick coat rippling as it dug its claws into the muddy riverbank. It was feeding, snapping up something from the water with unnerving precision. The size of the bear was beyond anything they had seen before, its massive shoulders and thick neck giving it an almost terrifying presence. The sight sent a cold shiver down Sarah's spine, but there was no panic. This was what they were trained for: observing, maintaining distance. The bear seemed unaware of their presence, focused entirely on the fish it was pulling from the river. They crouched behind a nearby thicket, the air suddenly thick with the weight of silence. Every move they made seemed amplified, the rustling of leaves beneath their boots feeling as loud as a gunshot. Sarah's heart raced, but she maintained her composure, her fingers tightening around the camera she'd brought along, ever ready to capture a rare moment like this. For a few moments they simply watched in awe, both transfixed by the power and grace the bear exhibited as it fed. The enormous creature moved fluidly, as if it ruled the land and the river alike, its broad back hunched slightly as it reached down, its fur glistening in the soft morning light. There was something majestic about it, something that demanded respect. They were visitors here, just as vulnerable as any other creature in the park. Suddenly, without warning, the bear paused. Its head jerked up, ears twitching, and it froze, nostrils flaring as it caught a faint scent on the wind. The entire scene shifted. The bear's body stiffened. It was alert now. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, her body tensing. They were too close, too visible, but the bear hadn't noticed them yet. Jake's hand shot up, signaling for them to stay still. He looked at Sarah, his eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. They were too close. The bear was right there, and their only hope now was to remain unnoticed. But the bear's gaze snapped to them, its eyes locking with Sarah's across the distance. In that instant, Sarah's heart pounded against her chest. The bear's gaze was intense, filled with curiosity. There was no fear in its eyes, only a kind of calculation. The air was heavy with tension. Sarah's mind raced. She slowly raised the camera to her eye. Her fingers shook as she pressed the shutter, capturing the moment, freezing the beast in time. The sound of the camera's click was like a shot in the air. In an instant, the grizzly's massive body jerked into motion, its head swiveling quickly to assess the threat. For a moment, time seemed to freeze again, the bear's posture shifting from curiosity to something darker. Then it stood. The movement was so swift, so powerful that Sarah's breath caught. The bear was on its hind legs, towering over them like a living mountain, its bulk blocking out the sky. It was enormous, unimaginably large, its claws gleaming in the light as it loomed above the river. Sarah estimated the beast to weigh over 1,600 pounds. Her heart slammed in her chest, but before she could even react, the bear dropped back to all fours and bolted into the woods. The sheer power and speed of the bear's retreat left Sarah and Jake standing in stunned silence. It had gone, but the echo of its presence lingered in the air like a storm just passed. For a long moment, neither spoke. Sarah lowered the camera, her breath ragged in her chest as she tried to steady herself. The adrenaline surged through her body, and she could feel the tremor of the encounter in every muscle, every nerve. They had come so close, too close. They waited a few more minutes just to be certain the bear was truly gone, before slowly standing and heading back to their patrol vehicle. The forest around them seemed quieter, more still, as if it had become aware of their intrusion. Later, the photos they took were analyzed by wildlife experts, who confirmed that the bear was one of the largest grizzlies ever recorded in the park. The size and sheer strength of it were reminders that nature was unpredictable, and that the balance between humans and wildlife was delicate and fragile. Sarah and Jake had seen the bear, experienced the raw power of the wild up close. The encounter stayed with them, haunting their dreams and reminding them of the fine line between admiration and survival. Lucas and Emily had been working together for over a year as U.S. Rangers, two of the most trusted officers assigned to Kodiak Island's wilderness. At 45 years old, Lucas was known for his calm demeanor and sharp instincts. Emily, just a few years younger, had a relentless drive and a deep respect for the wilderness that made her a perfect partner. On May 8, 2000, they were on a routine expedition in a remote part of Kodiak, scouting the area for a new conservation project aimed at preserving the island's delicate ecosystem. The dense forest and towering peaks around them were breathtaking, but there was something in the air that day, something that made the hairs on the back of Lucas's neck stand on end. He had sensed it first, the sharp scent of something wild. Kodiak bears were not uncommon in these parts, but the size of the one they had spotted earlier on their way there had been alarming. They had taken every precaution, setting up their camp with care and keeping their distance from the bear's known territory. Still, nature had a way of surprising even the most experienced rangers. They had just finished securing their equipment near the edge of the forest. Their camp nestled in a small clearing by a shallow stream. The sounds of birds and rustling leaves surrounded them, but everything felt too quiet, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Lucas glanced at Emily, his instincts kicking in. She, too, was alert, her eyes scanning the surrounding trees. Neither of them had seen or heard anything unusual, but they both knew it was foolish to ignore the signs of danger that lurked just beyond the tree line. And then it came. At first, it was just a movement, too large, too heavy to be a deer. Then the unmistakable shape of a massive Kodiak bear emerged from the shadows, its dark, hulking body moving slowly but steadily toward their camp. Its fur was thick and matted, its muscles rippling beneath the pelt. The bear's eyes locked onto them, its nostrils flaring as it picked up the scent of their food and equipment. It was huge, its size and presence almost overwhelming, like a living mountain moving through the brush. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest as he turned to Emily, his hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. They knew how to handle encounters with bears, but seeing one this close, especially one this large, was entirely different. The bear was cautious at first, moving slowly, its eyes never leaving them as it approached the camp. It looked as if it were deciding whether they were worth the trouble. Lucas whispered, telling Emily to stay calm and that everything was going to be okay, though his own words did little to reassure him. He tightened his grip on his rifle and signaled to Emily to slowly back away. They had to retreat, slowly, cautiously, without provoking the bear. But as they began to move, the bear's pace quickened. Its eyes flared with sudden aggression, and in a heartbeat it lunged forward, the ground trembling beneath its massive weight. Lucas's heart slammed against his ribcage as he raised his rifle, aiming for the air. He pulled the trigger twice, the sharp crack of the warning shots echoing through the trees. But instead of retreating, the bear only became faster, its enormous paws slamming against the earth in a deadly rhythm. The rifle's mechanism jammed. Lucas's breath caught in his throat as he tried to clear the obstruction, but the bear was already upon him. It was as if time slowed, the world around him narrowing to the unstoppable force charging toward him. With a violent roar, the bear collided with him, slamming him to the ground with a force that rattled his skull. Pain exploded through Lucas's body as he felt the bear's claws rake across his chest. He tried to push the beast away, but his strength was no match for its sheer size. One powerful swipe from the bear's paw sent his head spinning, and the world around him darkened as unconsciousness began to take hold. Emily's heart raced as she watched the bear attack Lucas, her body frozen in shock. Everything felt surreal, as though things were happening in slow motion. She couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Her mind screamed for her to help, to do something, but all she could see was the savage power of the bear, its jaws snapping dangerously close to Lucas. Without thinking, Emily lunged forward, grabbing for a nearby flare gun. She fired into the air, the bright flash lighting up the forest. But the bear didn't seem to care. It was too focused on Lucas. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears as she reached for her radio, desperate to call for help. But she only managed to get a word or two out before the bear turned, its massive head swinging toward her. The next thing she knew, the bear was on her, its claws sinking into her flesh. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the forest. As the bear's weight pressed down on her, she tried to fight back, to push it off, but Emily feared it was over. The animal's teeth sank into her shoulder. She could feel the life draining from her body, but somehow her hand still gripped the radio. She managed to pull herself away just enough to activate the distress signal, sending a frantic call for help before her vision blurred and her body gave in to exhaustion and blood loss. She collapsed, her body crumpling to the ground as darkness claimed her. 30 minutes later, when the rescue team arrived, they found Emily barely alive and covered in blood, her pulse faint, but still present. Lucas, however, was beyond help. The bear had left nothing behind of him but a lifeless, mangled body. The attack shook the entire ranger community to its core. Lucas had been an experienced ranger, one of the best, and yet the unpredictability of nature had claimed his life. Emily survived, but the emotional and physical toll was immense. The tragic event led to immediate changes in the safety protocols for rangers working in bear territories. New guidelines were established, and specialized bear deterrents were put in place, ensuring that no ranger would face a similar fate. Emily would carry the memory of her fallen partner, Lucas, with her forever, determined to honor his sacrifice and continue the vital work they had started together. 27-year-old Luca had dreamed of exploring the wilderness of Wyoming for years. The chance to witness nature's raw beauty was all that had driven him to take a solo hike across the park's famous Lamar Valley. As a tourist from Italy, he was thrilled by the prospect of experiencing the American wilderness firsthand. With a backpack slung over his shoulder and his camera ready, Luca felt like an adventurer, ready to embrace whatever the trail had to offer. The morning sun filtered through the trees as he trekked along the path, a quiet hum of excitement running through his veins. Luca was no stranger to hiking, though this was his first time in a park so wild and vast. He had prepared, reading up on the terrain, the wildlife, and the risks of bear encounters, but in his mind those were dangers that happened to others, not to someone young and strong like him. He smiled to himself as he passed through the lush meadows of the valley. The trail twisted and turned along the riverbanks, and the sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling convinced Luca he was safe. He had been hiking for several hours when he reached a narrow bend in the trail, where the underbrush thickened and the path grew quiet. The sudden shift in atmosphere made Luca pause. He couldn't pinpoint why, but something felt off. His instincts kicked in and he slowly began to retrace his steps. But before he could make any decisions, the rustling sounds in the bushes ahead became unmistakable. A shadow loomed just beyond the brush, and before Luca could react, the massive shape of a grizzly bear emerged, its shaggy coat glistening under the sunlight. The bear's eyes locked onto him, and Luca froze. The bear's ears flattened, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. What made the situation worse was the small group of cubs trailing behind her. The mother bear stood tall, her protective instincts taking over. Luca's heart pounded in his chest as he realized that he had walked right into their territory. The bear's stare never wavered, and Luca's breath caught in his throat as he instinctively took a step back. He knew better than to turn and run, but panic overtook him. He tried to back away slowly, but his legs didn't listen to him. He started sprinting, and then the bear lunged, covering the distance between them in a matter of seconds. Luca's heart nearly stopped as he stumbled backward. His feet caught in the uneven ground. The bear slammed into him with crushing force, sending him to the ground. The air was knocked from his lungs, and a sharp pain shot through his body as he crashed to the dirt. His hands instinctively went to protect his head, but the bear was focused on his exposed chest. Its claws raked across Luca's chest, the thick, razor-sharp talons digging deep into his skin. Luca screamed, the pain searing through him as the bear's weight pressed down on him. He tried to push it off, his arms trembling under the immense pressure, but the bear's grip tightened. His legs were pinned beneath the massive body, and with a terrifying roar, the bear swiped its claws across his thighs, leaving deep, gaping wounds. Blood poured from the gashes, and Luca gasped for air, each breath labored and ragged. But then, the sharp sound of shouting voices sliced through the air, and the bear's attention shifted. A group of hikers had seen the attack. They had heard his cries for help, and they weren't about to stand by and let the bear finish its mauling. Panic-stricken but determined, they made loud noises, banging sticks together and shouting as loudly as they could. The bear hesitated, its massive body tense, the growl in its throat rumbling as it scanned the area. For a split second, the bear seemed to pause, its focus shifting from Luca to the commotion behind it. Luca could feel its claws retracting slightly, its weight lessening as it considered retreating. The hikers pressed forward, yelling and making more noise, trying to scare the bear off. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the grizzly let out a low growl, its eyes flicking between Luca and the group before it turned and lumbered back toward the woods, taking its cubs with it. The hikers rushed to Luca's side. One of them immediately dialed for help while the others tried to keep him awake, their hands shaking as they applied pressure to his wounds. His vision was blurred and his body felt as though it were made of lead, but he was alive. Through the haze of pain, he could hear the distant sound of a helicopter approaching, the blades cutting through the air, growing louder with each passing second. Within minutes, the Rangers arrived. They worked swiftly, assessing Luca's condition. His blood loss was already considerable. They carefully placed him on a stretcher and airlifted him to a nearby hospital, the chopper's whirling blades cutting through the cold mountain air. Luca's survival was nothing short of a miracle. However, the attack left him with permanent scars, both physical and emotional. His legs and chest were badly injured, and though he would eventually regain the use of his limbs, he would never forget the sheer terror of that moment. The park rangers had done everything they could, but it was the hiker's quick thinking that had saved his life. In the wake of the attack, the park launched a series of awareness campaigns aimed at international visitors, emphasizing the importance of bear safety and proper precautions when hiking in bear country. For Luca, the wilderness would forever be a place of awe and fear, and the scars he bore would always be a testament to the risks he had taken in the name of adventure. Kevin had always been the type of person who sought thrills, whether it was bungee jumping off cliffs or navigating the busy streets of foreign cities. Adventure ran in his veins. At 32 years old, he was confident in his ability to handle any situation, even if it meant pushing the boundaries of safety. So when he arrived in the wilderness of Montana during a solo trip across the U.S., the promise of untamed nature and the chance to see wildlife up close excited him. The day had started like any other in the park. Kevin had driven along the winding roads, stopping occasionally to take photos of the sweeping landscapes and the occasional animal sighting. But it wasn't until he reached a secluded spot that his adventure truly took a dangerous turn. He spotted the grizzly from a distance. It was moving slowly through the tall grass, its fur glistening in the afternoon sun. Kevin stopped his car, excitement coursing through him as he grabbed his phone and started live streaming. He had seen bears from afar before, but this was the kind of close encounter he had only dreamed about. The park had strict rules about keeping a safe distance from the animals, especially bears. The signs were clear, urging visitors to keep their distance. But the thrill of being so close to such an imposing creature clouded Kevin's judgment. He ignored the warnings, thinking that a few steps closer wouldn't hurt. After all, he had seen people on social media getting close to wildlife, capturing the perfect photo. Why couldn't he do the same? With his phone held up, Kevin moved toward the bear, narrating his excitement to the live audience. The distance between them quickly closed, and the bear seemed unaware of his presence, its focus on the grass in front of it. Kevin's heart raced as he crept closer, the grass crunching underfoot. A smile tugged at the corners of his lips. This was going to be the perfect shot, a selfie with the mighty grizzly in the background. He felt invincible, as if nothing could go wrong. But nature had other plans. The bear, with its keen sense of smell and heightened awareness, suddenly raised its head. Its nostrils flared as it sniffed the air. The shift in its posture was subtle at first, but Kevin noticed it immediately. The bear's ears flattened, and its dark eyes narrowed as it locked onto him. Panic gripped Kevin's chest. He froze, feeling his breath catch in his throat. The bear didn't look afraid, it looked angry. For a moment, the bear simply stared at him, its massive body still, its muscles tensing under its thick fur. Kevin's heart raced, and he realized too late that he had crossed a line. He was too close. The bear had every reason to feel threatened. Then, in the blink of an eye, the bear surged forward with terrifying speed. Kevin's body screamed at him to run, but his legs were paralyzed, locked in place by fear. He turned to flee, but the bear's powerful legs covered the ground between them in seconds. Before Kevin could even reach the safety of his car, the bear crashed into him. The impact was like being hit by a freight train. Kevin was knocked off his feet, his body slamming into the ground with bone-jarring force. His phone landed nearby, still recording. He gasped for air as the weight of the bear pressed down on him, its claws raking across his chest and arms. The pain was immediate, sharp, and unbearable. Its claws dug deeper into his flesh, tearing through his body, and his own screams echoed in the open space. As the bear mauled him, Kevin's mind flashed to the warnings he had ignored just moments before. He had been stupid, and now he was paying the price. Every movement felt like it was in slow motion, his arms flailing, trying to defend himself, but it was useless. The bear was relentless, its jaws snapping at his legs as it tore into his flesh. His body was covered in blood and his vision blurred from the pain. The sound of his screams carried through the open air, piercing the relative calmness of the park. His live stream continued, the horrifying attack unfolding in real time before horrified viewers. Messages flooded the chat, some begging him to run, others frantically typing for someone to call the authorities. But Kevin couldn't see the messages. He couldn't do anything. A group of tourists hiking on a nearby trail heard the commotion. They stopped dead in their tracks, recognizing the danger, but they were too far to intervene. They couldn't get to him in time. Panic rose in their chests as they fumbled for their phones, dialing emergency services as quickly as they could. But the bear continued its brutal assault, showing no sign of letting up. Kevin's body went limp as the bear's claws raked across his abdomen. His breath was ragged, each exhale a labored effort, his chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. The bear finally backed off slightly, but it wasn't finished. Kevin tried to scramble away, but his limbs felt like lead. Blood pooled around him, and his vision faded further. His thoughts became fragmented. He couldn't move anymore. He couldn't even scream. Finally, the hikers, still too far away to help, managed to get through to the rangers. When emergency services arrived, the bear was gone, but so was Kevin. The live stream had ended. His torn body lay helpless on the ground. The footage of the attack spread rapidly, fueling widespread outrage and sadness. People mourned Kevin's tragic end, but there was also an undercurrent of anger. His reckless decision to get close to the bear had cost him his life, but it also served as a grim reminder of the dangers of ignoring safety regulations in places like this. For Kevin's family and friends, the pain of losing him would never fully go away. They mourned not just his death, but the tragic way in which it had happened. The air was crisp and clean as the blue sky stretched across Kodiak Island, Alaska. Ryan, an adventurous 8-year-old, was excited for the family camping trip that had brought them to the wilds of this remote part of the world. It was an opportunity for his parents, Laura and Mark, to escape the stress of their busy lives, and for Ryan to explore the beauty of nature. They set up their camp near the edge of a secluded forest, with tall, thick trees forming a natural barrier around their site. The sounds of birds and the rustling of leaves filled the air as they enjoyed their afternoon. The day had been perfect. They had spent hours hiking along the nearby trails, with Ryan running ahead, his energy boundless as he tried to keep up with the laughter of his parents. They explored the edges of the creek, skipping rocks and feeling the cool water on their skin. After a while, tired from the long walk, Ryan's parents settled near their campfire, enjoying the warmth while Ryan found new places to explore on his own. It was the perfect family trip, until it wasn't. While his parents relaxed by the campfire, Ryan, ever curious and eager to explore, wandered off toward the creek not far from their campsite. The water flowed gently, babbling over rocks and pebbles. Ryan knelt beside the creek, watching as fish darted in the shallows, his small fingers dipping into the cool water. He was lost in the beauty of his surroundings, unaware of the dangers that lurked in the woods beyond. What Ryan didn't know was that just beyond the trees, a Kodiak bear had been foraging through the forest. The powerful scent of the campfire, mixed with the smell of food from their cooking area, had caught the bear's attention. Bears on Kodiak Island were known for their massive size and ferocity, and they were particularly drawn to human settlements during the warmer months when food was more abundant. This particular bear, a mature male, was prowling through the forest, searching for an easy meal. The scent of food, combined with the presence of the curious child, led it closer to the creek, its nose twitching as it picked up the smell. Ryan, unaware of the bear's presence, continued to play at the water's edge. The bear, its massive body hidden in the shadows of the trees, had spotted the child. It watched him for a few moments until it could no longer resist. The bear moved silently through the trees, its large paws pressing into the earth without making a sound. The first warning came in the form of a low growl, barely audible over the rushing water of the creek. Ryan's head snapped up, his heart racing as the ground seemed to tremble. His instincts screamed at him to run, but before he could even turn, the bear charged with terrifying speed, crashing through the underbrush with a strength that shook the very trees. The ground beneath Ryan's feet shook as the bear closed the distance. Ryan screamed as the bear collided with him, knocking him to the ground. The impact was brutal. The massive creature's claws raked across his back, sending a shock of pain through his small body. The scream that escaped his throat was high-pitched and desperate, a cry for help that echoed through the woods. His frail body crumpled under the weight of the bear, unable to escape the terror of its attack. The bear began to swipe at Ryan, its claws slicing through the boy's clothes and skin. Ryan's screams enraged the bear as it continued its vicious assault. Blood stained the ground, and the boy's small body was tossed about like a rag doll under the immense strength of the bear. The creature's jaws snapped dangerously close to Ryan, narrowly missing his face as it clawed at him with unrelenting fury. His small frame was no match for the raw power of the bear. Back at the campsite, Mark and Laura, exhausted from the day's activities, were just beginning to settle into the quiet of the evening when they heard the first scream. The sound was unlike any they had ever heard, wild, terrified, and filled with pain. Without thinking, they both sprang to their feet, their hearts pounding as they realized the source of the scream. Their son. They raced toward the sound, panic rising in their chests. Mark's legs moved faster, but nothing seemed quick enough as they broke through the trees, their eyes frantically scanning the area. When they reached the creek, the sight that greeted them was beyond anything they could have prepared for. Ryan was on the ground, barely conscious, blood soaking into the dirt. The bear, having finished its attack, was retreating back into the trees, but it was too late. Ryan's body, limp and broken, lay where the bear had left him, his face pale and his breathing shallow. Mark dropped to his knees beside his son, his hands shaking as he tried to assess the damage. Laura, horrified and crying, pulled out her phone, frantically dialing for help. The world seemed to slow around them as they waited for emergency services to arrive, their hearts breaking with each passing second. They administered what first aid they could, applying pressure to the wounds, but the damage was severe. Ryan's small body was covered in deep lacerations, and the blood loss was immense. His breathing was labored and his eyes flickered weakly as he fought to hold on. Mark and Laura both tried to comfort him, but there was no denying what they both knew. Rescue teams arrived within 20 minutes, airlifting Ryan to the nearest medical facility. But by the time he reached the hospital, he had succumbed to his injuries. The damage inflicted by the bear had been too much for his young body to withstand. The devastating attack shook the community and ignited a wave of outrage and grief. Ryan's parents, though heartbroken, became advocates for increased safety measures in bear-populated areas, hoping to prevent future tragedies. In the wake of Ryan's death, park authorities rolled out new protocols, urging visitors to secure their food in bear-safe containers, stay vigilant at all times, and educate children on the dangers of approaching wildlife. The memory of Ryan's innocent adventure, a simple moment of joy in the wilderness, was forever tainted by the brutal attack. His family, forever changed by the events of that fateful day, became a symbol of the need for greater awareness and respect for the animals that shared the wild with them. The sun was beginning to dip behind the Sierra foothills, casting a warm golden hue across the suburban neighborhood in California. Karen, in her mid-40s, was wrapping up her evening routine. The calm of the evening was comforting as she stepped out of the back door of her house to check on the trash bins by the porch. She was an active woman, well acquainted with the natural surroundings of her home, living just on the edge of a residential area where the wilderness crept close to civilization. Karen had spent years in the foothills, well aware of the occasional wildlife sightings, but she had always felt safe in her neighborhood, trusting the ways of suburban life to protect her. As she stepped onto the porch, the faint smell of something sweet and nauseating drifted through the air, catching her attention. The lids of the trash bins near the corner of her yard had been knocked off. She didn't think much of it at first, assuming the wind had done it. But as she walked closer, her eyes widened in disbelief. In the growing twilight, she saw a large black bear, its frame hunched over the spilled contents of the bins. The bear, attracted by the scent of leftover food, was rummaging through the trash, seemingly oblivious to Karen's approach. Frozen for a moment, Karen's heart raced. She knew bears sometimes came into the neighborhood, but seeing one so close to her own home left her feeling uneasy. Her instincts told her to retreat inside, but curiosity got the better of her. She took a cautious step back, hoping the bear would simply wander off. But the bear, startled by her movement, immediately lifted its head, its dark eyes locking with hers. In that instant, the air shifted from calm to tense. The bear took a deep, aggressive sniff, and then everything changed. Karen raised her arms to protect herself, but it was no use. Her head slammed into the concrete as she hit the ground hard, pain radiating through her skull. The bear didn't hesitate. It was on her instantly. Its claws raked across her abdomen, tearing through the soft skin. Karen screamed, the sound sharp and panicked, echoing into the evening air. The bear swiped at her chest with a ferocity she couldn't have imagined. The weight of the animal was overwhelming, and Karen struggled to shield herself with her arms, feeling the sharp claws tear into her limbs. Her heart pounded, her breath coming in shallow gasps as the bear continued to maul her. She could feel its hot breath on her skin as it pressed down on her chest. Karen was certain that she wouldn't survive this. Panic surged within her as she realized how vulnerable she was, so close to death. But through the haze of pain, she heard the distant sound of something. Voices, then footsteps. People. Her neighbors were coming to save her. Her screams had drawn attention. As the bear continued its attack, the sound of shouting and rushing footsteps grew louder. A few nearby neighbors, alerted by her cries, rushed to her aid. Their voices rang out in a mixture of shock and fear. One man, Greg, was at the front of the group. He grabbed a garden hose and aimed the stream of water at the bear, hoping to drive it away. The bear, startled and irritated, paused its assault long enough to look toward the group of people. The neighbors were yelling, clanging pots and anything else they could find to make noise, while Greg kept the pressure on the hose. Slowly, the bear began to retreat. It disappeared into the thicket, leaving the scene. Karen lay on the ground, gasping for breath, her body bloodied and bruised. Her neighbors hurried to her side, their faces pale with shock as they knelt beside her. One woman, Anne, was trying to stop the bleeding, using a towel to press against Karen's abdomen. Another woman, Marcy, was already on the phone with emergency services, her voice frantic as she relayed their location. Within minutes, the sound of sirens broke the night's tense silence, growing louder as paramedics arrived at the scene. They rushed to Karen, working quickly to assess her injuries. She had deep claw marks across her chest and arms, and the damage to her abdomen was significant. Her head throbbed from the blow it had taken against the concrete. She was conscious, but barely. The pain was overwhelming, and her body felt as if it were shutting down. The paramedics had to be careful. Too much movement could cause more internal damage. As the ambulance doors closed, Karen's mind began to slip in and out of consciousness, the trauma of the attack lingering like a nightmare she couldn't escape. Hours later, after being treated at the hospital for serious but non-fatal injuries, Karen woke up in a sterile room. She was surrounded by doctors, nurses, and her family, who had arrived after being contacted. The worst of the physical damage had been addressed, but the emotional toll of the attack was just beginning to set in. The bear, meanwhile, had not gone unnoticed. Wildlife officers quickly began their search, and by the following morning they had located the bear near the outskirts of the neighborhood. It was tranquilized and relocated to a safer, more remote area. Local officials praised the quick response of the wildlife team, but the attack had already sparked a wider conversation about urban wildlife safety. Karen's story became a cautionary tale, prompting local authorities to implement stronger measures to bear-proof trash bins in the area. New education campaigns were launched, warning residents about the dangers of attracting wildlife with easily accessible food sources. The city encouraged everyone, especially those living near bear habitats, to be more vigilant and respectful of the wildlife surrounding them. The attack left its mark on Karen and the neighborhood. For Karen, the road to recovery would be long, both physically and emotionally. But it also left behind a strong message about the importance of respecting nature, especially when living so close to it.